Imagine watching an impenetrable hive city, right? Like, we're talking void shields raised, orbital defense lasers just humming with power.
Oh, yeah, and you've got millions of planetary defense troopers locked and loaded for a massive siege.
Exactly. And then it completely annihilates itself in under a week. I mean, no orbital bombardments, no Tyranid swarms blotting out the sun.
Right, no orc wall crashing against the adamantium walls.
Yeah, not a single enemy shot is fired. It's just one perfectly planted microscopic rumor.
And the truly terrifying part isn't even that the rumor worked. It's that, well, the planetary governor died genuinely believing he was saving the Imperium.
Oh man, by ordering the execution of his own command staff.
Precisely. I mean, he didn't just surrender. He actively engineered his own fortress's destruction because he was thoroughly convinced it was the only logical, loyalist move left on the board.
That is the exact nightmare we are stepping into today.
Yeah.
So welcome to the Deep Dive. If you're listening to this, you've probably felt that modern exhaustion, you know?
Oh, the exhaustion of trying to navigate misinformation and deepfakes.
Yeah. And conflicting narratives in our own world. You know the headache of trying to find the truth when everyone is lying.
Absolutely.
Now take that feeling, multiply it by a galaxy-spanning empire, hand that power to genetically engineered super soldiers, and, well, you have the focus of our deep dive today. We are pulling apart a staggering collection of excerpts from a text called The Hydra's Shadow, Philosophy and Tactics of the XX Legion.
It is a phenomenal source text, largely because it forces a complete reevaluation of military doctrine.
It really does.
When we look at the lore of the 41st millennium, the Space Marine legions are typically defined by overt mythological warfare. You have your siege masters, your berserkers, your angelic shock troops.
Right, the guy's kicking down the front door.
Exactly, but the Alpha Legion operates on an entirely different axis. They don't want to break your walls. They want to break your perception of reality.
So our mission today is to completely reframe how you think about conflict in this setting. We are pushing past the physical battlefield to dissect the ultimate masters of psychological destruction and information control.
Because, as the Hydra's Shadow argues, the most dangerous weapon in a galaxy of planet-cracking cannons is the weaponization of a lie.
Yeah, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by misinformation or wondered how empires truly fall, you are going to love this. We aren't talking about monsters or berserkers today. We're talking about something way more terrifying.
What's fascinating here is that to even begin analyzing their operational tactics, we have to look at the biological and structural anomaly at the very top of their hierarchy.
Right, the top of the food chain.
Yeah, the source material doesn't just describe a different philosophy. It describes a fundamentally divergent genesis. Every other legion had a singular primarch, right?
A single demigod serving as the genetic and ideological lodestone for their sons.
Exactly. But the XX Legion had twins, Alfarius and Omegon.
Okay, let's untack this right out of the gate because I have to push back on this concept just a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
From a purely logical, logistical standpoint, a twin command structure at the absolute pinnacle of a military hierarchy sounds like a catastrophic vulnerability.
You'd think so, yeah.
I mean, look at historical empires with co-emperors. Look at Rome under the Tetrarchy. It almost universally breeds jealousy, factionalism, and eventual civil war.
That's the standard human pattern, absolutely.
Right, so if you have two demigods who are genetically identical, how does that not immediately fracture the chain of command? You can't have two supreme commanders without troops inevitably picking favorites.
Or playing one off the other.
Exactly. It's like trying to play a high-stakes game of chess, but your opponent is a pair of twins secretly swapping seats beneath the table. And suddenly you realize half your own pieces are actually working for them.
That's a great way to put it. And in ass-line human military, you would be absolutely correct about the vulnerability, but the text suggests we have to discard baseline human psychology entirely here.
Okay, so how do they bypass the ego?
Well, the dynamic between Alfarius and Omegon isn't described as two competing egos sharing a throne. It is often hypothesized as one soul occupying two bodies.
Whoa. One soul.
Yeah, or perhaps a complete eradication of the concept of ego entirely. They don't compete because the individual I is completely subservient to the we, and by extension, subservient to the Legion.
So they essentially bypass the ego trap that doomed so many of their brother primarchs.
Precisely. And by doing so, they create an operational architecture that renders traditional military strategy completely impotent.
I mean, that makes decapitation strikes useless, right?
Exactly. Think about standard decapitation tactics. In any conventional theater of war, if you want to break an army without fighting every single soldier, you cut off the head of the snake.
You deploy an execution force, eliminate the supreme commander, and the whole rigid top-down hierarchy collapses into chaos.
Because all the operational authority and logistical bottlenecking happens at the top.
Right, the moment the general dies, the captains don't have the clearance or the strategic overview to coordinate the broader war effort.
But the Alpha Legion's entire guiding metaphor is the Hydra. You know, the mythological beast where severing one head immediately spawns two more.
Cut one off, two grow back.
Exactly. The twin Primarchs are the biological manifestation of this doctrine. If an Imperial assassin somehow manages the impossible...
Which is a huge if.
Right, huge if. But if they infiltrate the flagship, breach the sanctum, and put a bolt round through the skull of the Supreme Commander, they haven't actually killed the head of the Legion. They've just killed a head.
And the really insidious part, based on what the source implies about their use of body doubles and shared identity, is that the assassin might not have even killed one of the twins.
Oh, almost certainly not.
They might have just killed a rank-and-file legionnaire who drank the Primarch's blood to temporarily assume his physical dimensions and memories.
Which is just a staggering level of deception.
Yeah. So the assassin celebrates, the high command thinks the war is over, and meanwhile, the real command structure hasn't even blinked.
It creates this tactical void where your greatest victories against them are often illusions they permitted you to have. And this obscuration begins at the very root of their existence.
Right, their origins.
Yes, the text heavily emphasizes that the homeworld of the XX Legion is of entirely unknown origin.
I wanted to drill down into that, actually. Because in the context of the Great Crusade and the Space Marine Legions, a homeworld isn't just a point on a map.
Not at all. It's foundational.
Right, it is the cultural bedrock of the entire military force. McCraw gives you the bureaucratic, statesman-like stoicism of the Ultramarines.
Trigoris gives you the nomadic, fluid warfare of the White Scars.
Exactly. Knowing where an army comes from tells you what they value, what their honor codes are, and fundamentally how their minds work.
A planetary origin provides a psychological baseline. If you understand the environmental and social pressures that forged a commander, you can predict how they will react under stress.
You can figure out their risk tolerance.
Exactly. But the Alpha Legion's lack of an origin isn't just missing archival data. It is a weaponized blank space. If you don't know where they came from, you cannot profile them.
It's the ultimate intelligence blackout. I mean, if an Inquisitor tries to build a psychological profile to anticipate their next move, there's literally no foundation to build on.
Right. Are they proud? Are they pragmatic? Do they fear attrition? You just don't know.
And if you don't know their baseline, you leave their true motivations entirely in the dark.
You are fighting a shadow that shifts its shape depending on the light you shine on it. This dual nature of the Primarchs, combined with this cultivated void of an origin, isn't just deep lore trivia.
No, it's core to how they operate.
It is the absolute mechanical prerequisite that allowed them to execute their role in the Horus Heresy.
Let's transition into that, because this is where the source material genuinely made my head spin.
It's a complicated era for them.
Very. I mean, we all know the Horus Heresy is the defining, galaxy-splitting civil war of this setting. It's the ultimate binary conflict.
You are either a loyalist holding the line for Terra, or you are a traitor burning the galaxy for Horus and the ruinous powers.
Right, there is no middle ground.
Or so the historical records demand, we believe.
Well, yeah, but Hydra's shadow states that the Alpha Legion's role is the most debated, paradoxical aspect of the entire war.
They officially sided with Horus, sure.
But the text outlines numerous engagements where their actions seemingly sabotaged the traitor war effort or inadvertently aided isolated loyalist pockets. They appeared to play both sides simultaneously.
And they did it with frightening efficiency.
Yeah, and here's the sentence from the text that I really struggled with. It says, "Their web of schemes is so complex, so deeply layered with double blinds and compartmentalized falsehoods, that their true loyalty is a mystery even to themselves."
It is an incredibly difficult concept to operationalize in a real military setting.
So here is my challenge to that premise. Wait, if your schemes are so complicated that you confuse yourself about your own loyalties, are you actually a strategic genius, or have you just lost the plot entirely?
That's a very fair critique.
I mean, if your commanders literally don't know if they are fighting to save the Imperium or destroy it, at a certain point, a scheme that outsmarts its own creator is just a failure, isn't it?
This raises an important question about the nature of victory for the XX Legion, and it touches on the profound tragedy of their existence, really.
How so?
Well, it is very tempting to look at that line and conclude they are just arrogant tacticians who tripped over their own shoelaces. But if we dig into their relationship with chaos, as outlined in the text, a much more sinister dynamic emerges.
The source notes they never fully fell to chaos, yet serve its purposes, which always seemed like a contradiction to me.
Right, because usually falling to chaos involves very overt metaphysical corruption.
Yeah, mutations, blood sacrifices, actively pledging your soul to deities in the warp. The Alpha Legion generally avoids that. They maintain their discipline. They don't look like monsters.
But we project human religious frameworks onto chaos, assuming it requires active, conscious worship. It doesn't.
Oh, interesting.
Chaos is, at its most fundamental level, entropy. It is the dissolution of order, logic, and reality. The Alpha Legion might deeply believe they are remaining independent, walking a razor-thin tightrope between imperial dogma and chaos corruption.
Thinking they can utilize both as tools for some grand, hidden objective.
Exactly. But by constantly sowing doubt, by breaking down supply chains, by making allies fire on each other, they are generating pure entropy.
I see. So the tragedy is that the tightrope they think they're walking is actually made of chaos.
Yes. By engineering a war where they play both sides so thoroughly that absolute loyalty becomes an extinct concept, they have inadvertently manifested the ultimate goal of the ruinous powers.
The complete and total breakdown of reality.
They don't need to chant to dark gods. Their methodology is the worship. They feed the warp with pure, unadulterated confusion.
Wow. That reframes everything. It means the genius of their strategy is entirely subjective.
Completely subjective.
They might be executing flawlessly according to their own compartmentalized parameters, but the macro result is just anarchic decay.
And that perfectly contextualizes the excerpt the source provides regarding the Alpha Legionnaire's testimony.
The
Yeah.
captured operative. That was a fascinating case study in narrative unreliability.
It really is. I mean, put yourself in the position of an inquisitor interrogating that operative.
Okay, so the source mentions that occasionally the Inquisition or Loyalist forces managed to capture an Alpha Legionnaire and extract a confession or a testimony.
Right, and you would assume that breaking a super soldier and getting them to talk would finally provide a clear window into their grand strategy.
But the text explicitly states that these testimonies only ever add fuel to the debate. They never settle the question.
So imagine you're the interrogator. The Legionnaire gives you a detailed, highly plausible breakdown of an impending assassination plot against a sector governor. What do you do with that information?
Well, I'd have to act on it. I'd reinforce the governor's detail, lock down the sector. I can't just ignore it.
But you know the prisoner is an Alpha Legionnaire. Their entire tactical doctrine is built on deception.
Right.
So is the prisoner telling you the truth because they have been broken by torture? Or did they intentionally get themselves captured specifically to feed you this exact information?
Oh, man. So if I reinforce the governor, I might be pulling troops away from the actual target, which was like the orbital dockyards the whole time.
Exactly. The confession was just a lever to move your pieces where they wanted them.
But wait, to add another layer of the Hydra to this, what if the prisoner thinks they are telling the truth?
Yes. Because the Legion is so compartmentalized, the operative's commander might have fed them false intelligence, knowing they would eventually be captured and interrogated.
So the operative isn't lying to you. They are conveying a weaponized falsehood they genuinely believe is true.
Which means, as the interrogator, you literally cannot use the information. Whether it's true or false, the act of acting on it is likely the trigger for the real trap.
That is paralyzing. And it speaks to the logistical nightmare of running an army like this.
It's completely counterintuitive to how armies work.
If you are waging a war where the generals are actively deceiving the captains to maintain operational security, a traditional centralized military hierarchy would shatter.
You can't issue standard theater-wide commands if half the army needs to be kept in the dark about the other half's objectives.
Which necessitates a completely different kind of society and structure. It demands a bespoke organizational model, which the text details beautifully in its breakdown of the structure of the serpent.
Yes, Section 3. The Alpha Legion is described as the most decentralized and fragmented of all the legions.
They abandon standard company and chapter structures in favor of isolated autonomous cells.
Let's look at how that actually functions, because this is a massive departure from standard Astartes doctrine.
Usually you have a chapter master, captains, lieutenants, all reporting up a very rigid chain.
But the Alpha Legion operates in these disconnected cells that might not even know the other cells exist.
Right. It mirrors the structure of extreme real-world insurgencies or even terror networks.
The primary benefit is the creation of an ultimate intelligence firewall.
Because if Imperial forces corner one cell, wipe them out, and manage to recover their databanks, the wider Legion is entirely uncompromised.
Exactly. The captured cell cannot betray the location of the next cell because they simply do not possess the data.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Reading this section, I couldn't help but compare the Alpha Legion structure to the Internet.
Ah, that's a brilliant comparison.
Yeah, think about it. When the Internet was first conceptualized, the goal was to create a communication network that could survive a nuclear strike.
Right, you couldn't have a central hub.
Because if someone nuked the central hub, the whole network dies. So they created a decentralized web. You can't just turn off the Internet by smashing one computer.
The data packets just dynamically route around the damage through 1,000 other nodes.
Exactly. The Alpha Legion is essentially a localized, self-sustaining virus in the galaxy's operating system.
That is a phenomenal parallel.
But here's my logistical question on that.
Mm-hmm.
If the cells are isolated, and they don't have a central command constantly beaming them updated orders.
Which they can't, because astropathic communication is easily intercepted.
Right, so how do they coordinate? How does a cell operating in one sector know when to trigger an uprising that perfectly coincides with a supply line raid coordinated by a cell on the other side of the galaxy?
Well, they don't coordinate in real time.
They don't.
No. They operate on pre-programmed behavioral algorithms and coded operational thresholds.
Wait, really? How does that work?
A cell is seeded onto a planet with a dormant objective. They integrate, they observe, and they wait for a specific set of environmental triggers.
Like what kind of triggers?
It could be anything. A particular tax rate increase, a specific fleet deployment, or even a prearranged phrase hidden in a seemingly mundane public broadcast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Once that threshold is met, the cell activates and executes its specific mandate. The coordination happened centuries ago in the planning phase.
That requires an unfathomable level of patience and foresight. But it also requires something even more difficult to instill in a soldier.
What's that?
The text points to a specific cultural trait that allows these isolated cells to function without constant supervision. It's their profound distrust of absolute.
Ah, yes. Let's put that concept under the microscope, because we're talking about space marines here.
Right. Astartes are biologically and psychologically engineered for absolute loyalty. They undergo extreme hypno-indoctrination.
For every other legion, absolutes are the armor of the mind. The emperor is perfect. The enemy is evil. My commander's orders are infallible.
Because if you're holding a trench against 1 million orcs, you can't be debating the ethical nuance of your orders. You need to pull the trigger without hesitation.
If you strip away those absolutes, you strip away a soldier's primary psychological defense mechanism.
So what does it mean for a super soldier to distrust absolute truth?
What the Alpha Legion does is strip away that armor and replace it with extreme weaponized critical thinking. To profoundly distrust absolutes means they are conditioned to question everything.
They question the intelligence they steal. They question the public narratives of the Imperium.
But crucially, they question their own intelligence and their own orders.
Which, again, sounds like a nightmare for a military commander. How do you issue an order to a squad knowing they are going to second-guess it?
Because the commander isn't issuing a rigid command, they are issuing an intent.
An intent.
Yes. In a rigid army, if a squad is ordered to take a hill and they arrive to find the hill fortified with unexpected artillery, they might just charge anyway and die because orders are orders.
Right. The absolute truth of the order overrides their survival instinct.
Exactly. But an Alpha Legion cell, fueled by a distrust of absolutes, recognizes that the intelligence was flawed. The absolute truth of the order is invalid, so they adapt.
They don't charge the hill.
No, they quietly poison the water supply of the artillery crew and wait 3 weeks for them to die of dysentery.
So they value adaptability over obedience. They operate under the baseline assumption that the situation will change, that intelligence is likely compromised.
Even a transmission from their own high command might be a test, or a false flag planted by an enemy. It forces every single operative to be a master strategist in their own right.
And because they operate in this isolated, hyper-skeptical state, their method of waging war looks completely alien compared to the brute force tactics of their brother legions.
They don't wage war. They manufacture systemic collapse.
Let's get into the mechanics of that, because Section 4 of the source material outlines their combat doctrine, which they call the art of the unseen war.
A very fitting title.
It states their victory relies entirely on deception, infiltration, and psychological warfare. The goal isn't to smash the enemy's army with your army. The goal is to create uncertainty so profound that the enemy simply defeats itself.
The most dangerous weapon is not a bolt gun or blade, but a convincing lie.
Now, this is a beautiful philosophical concept, but practically, how exactly does an enemy defeat itself just from uncertainty? Uncertainty doesn't stop a charging Titan.
It does if you point the Titan at its own allies.
Okay, I need to understand the granular mechanics of how a lie actually dismantles a fortified hive city.
Let's build a hypothetical scenario that maps perfectly to their known operational history.
All right, let's do it.
Put yourself in the boots of an Imperial Lord General. You are tasked with holding a vital industrial world. You have 1,000,000 highly trained Imperial Guard under your command, massive orbital defense arrays, and supply lines stretching to 12 agro-worlds.
Okay, I'm the Lord General. I've got a massive army.
Now, if a splinter fleet of Tyranids enters the system, your response is binary and clear.
I raise the void shields, point every macro cannon at the sky, and rally the troops. The threat is external, it's visible, and it unifies the entire planet against a common enemy. Everyone knows their job.
Exactly. Now let's swap the Tyranids for an Alpha Legion harrowing. You never see a fleet on your augur arrays, no alarm sound.
So I don't even know I'm under attack.
Right, but on day one, a low-level clerk in the Munitorum who has actually been an Alpha Legion sleeper agent for 2 decades alters a single digit on a shipping manifest, just one number.
Okay. A clerical error? Not exactly a terrifying opening salvo.
2 weeks later, the Prometheum fuel reserves for your planetary defense fighters are diverted to a civilian agricultural sector instead of the military starports.
Ah.
At the same time, an astropathic transmission arrives from a neighboring sector, heavily encrypted, bearing the seal of the Inquisition. The message warns that a high-ranking member of your own staff is operating an unsanctioned cult.
So now my fighters are grounded due to a logistical error, and I'm looking at my generals wondering which one is a heretic.
The paranoia starts to creep in.
But I'm still in control. I initiate an internal audit and order the fuel rerouted back to the military.
Good move. But while your attention is focused on the internal audit, an Alpha Legion kill team wearing the armor of a completely different Loyalist Space Marine chapter ambushes one of your primary planetary defense patrols out in the wasteland.
Wait, they're disguised as loyalists.
Yes. They leave no survivors, but they deliberately leave behind forensic evidence pointing to a specific local noble house that has a historical grievance with your command.
Oh, wow. So now the narrative isn't just an internal leak. It looks like an active rebellion by the local aristocracy.
And remember that fuel you ordered rerouted?
Yeah.
It never arrives. Because while the first sleeper agent altered the manifest, a second cell quietly compromised the Transit Guild's communication relays. Your orders are being broadcast, but they are being subtly altered in transit.
So what happens to the fuel?
Suddenly, food shipments meant for the lower hive levels are redirected to the noble spires instead.
The lower levels are already a powder keg. If I starve them while supposedly feeling the nobles who I already suspect of treason, I'm triggering a class war.
Exactly. Riots break out in the lower hives. You have to deploy your Imperial Guard to quell the uprisings, effectively turning your military against your own civilian population. Blood is shed. Morale plummets.
The planet is tearing itself apart.
And in the chaos, the Alpha Legion broadcasts a deepfake Vox transmission on all military channels, using your exact voice, ordering a tactical withdrawal from the primary orbital defense batteries.
Oh, that's brutal. So half my commanders follow the order and abandon their posts.
And the other half?
The other half realize it makes no strategic sense and assume the commanders retreating are the traitors the Inquisition warned about.
So what happens next?
My loyal commanders open fire on my other loyal commanders to prevent them from abandoning the defense lasers. A civil war erupts within my own command staff.
The planetary defense network goes offline due to friendly fire. The hive cities are burning from bread riots. Your military is executing itself.
And the Alpha Legion hasn't deployed a single-massed infantry charge. They haven't fired an orbital bombardment.
They simply altered a spreadsheet, sent a fake email, and pulled a few levers of human nature. They win the battle without firing a single shot.
They win the planet, and they leave me to die in the rubble of my own paranoia, wondering how I lost.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it exposes the massive structural flaw in the Imperium's entire philosophy of war.
Yeah, let's talk about that contrast, because the Imperium is a blunt instrument. They fight wars of attrition.
They will feed 10 million guardsmen into a meat grinder just to hold a single bridge for a week.
And the logistics required to move, feed, and arm those 10 million men is astronomical.
It is the most resource-heavy, inefficient, bloody method of warfare imaginable, born out of sheer bureaucratic inertia.
But the Alpha Legion bypasses the meat grinder entirely. I mean, why fight 10 million men when you can just convince the man operating the bridge's structural supports that his commanding officer wants to murder his family?
Exactly. It is an elegant, chilling efficiency. A well-crafted lie has an infinite blast radius, and it costs zero resources to manufacture.
Which transitions us perfectly into the thematic climax of the source material. Section 5 delves into the ultimate horror of the Alpha Legion.
It elevates them from a brilliant tactical threat to a profound existential terror.
The text posits that they are the literal embodiment of the Imperium's most primal fear, the enemy within.
Let's linger on that comparison. The Imperium is surrounded by existential horrors, right?
Tyranids that want to consume all biomass. Necrons that want to strip the galaxy of life. Orcs that live only for slaughter.
These are apocalyptic external pressures. But the text argues that the Alpha Legion proves that the human heart, when corrupted by lies and doubt, is a vastly greater threat than any alien monstrosity.
So what does this all mean? I was struck by the tragic irony of it all. The Imperium has spent 10,000 years fortifying the galaxy.
They build continent-sized walls of adamantium. They forge macro cannons the size of skyscrapers.
They genetically engineer soldiers to spit acid and punch through tank armor. All of this to fight external monsters. But all of that armor, all of those weapons, are utterly useless against a whisper of doubt.
Because you cannot put armor plating on human psychology. You can build a fortress to keep out a Tyranid swarm, but you cannot build a fortress to keep out a thought.
Are the Alpha Legion actually the most dangerous threat, precisely because they exploit the one thing the Imperium can't armor human nature?
I believe so. And that is why the psychological threat of the Alpha Legion is so vastly superior. An external threat, no matter how brutal, reinforces social cohesion.
Right. An orc invasion is terrifying, but it crystallizes the absolutes we talked about earlier. It proves the Emperor's propaganda right.
We are humanity. They are the alien. The alien wants to kill you, so you must stand shoulder to shoulder with your brother and fire your lasgun.
It unifies a fractured populace through shared trauma.
But the Alpha Legion's methodology weaponizes our own survival instincts against us. They don't attack the walls. They attack the bonds of trust that allow a society to man the walls.
They turn brother against brother.
They make the populace fear the enforcer, and the enforcer fear the governor, and the governor fear the shadows. They divide and atomize humanity.
And this brings us back to the mathematics of the Hydra that the source material keeps circling back to. Even if 1,000 of their heads are cut off, 1,000 more will take their place.
When we first talked about this, we applied it physically. The twin Primarchs, the decentralized cells that can't be wiped out in one strike.
But on a deeper systemic level, the Hydra isn't just about troop numbers or command chains. It is about the contagion of an idea.
Paranoia is the ultimate self-replicating organism. Once it is introduced into a closed system, it doesn't just survive. It multiplies exponentially without any further input from the creator.
That is genuinely chilling. The paranoia itself becomes the Hydra. Let's say you're that planetary governor we talked about earlier. You intercept that fake transmission, and you execute 10 of your generals for suspected treason.
You feel you've solved the problem. You cut off a head of the snake.
But the very act of executing them breeds new heads. The next morning you wake up and wonder, did I get all of them?
What if the lieutenant who supplied the evidence against the generals fabricated it just to clear his path for a promotion?
What if my personal bodyguard was loyal to one of the dead generals? Now instead of 10 suspects, you have 1,000.
You've created 1,000 new heads of the Hydra, and they aren't even Alpha Legionnaires. They are your own paranoid thoughts projected onto your own loyal citizens.
And the tragic reality of the 41st millennium is that the Imperium's primary mechanism for dealing with this paranoia only feeds it.
The Inquisition, the Adeptus Arbites, the constant purges. The system is designed to root out heresy through extreme violence and suspicion.
The Alpha Legion doesn't have to break the Imperial machine. They just have to gently push it so it grinds its own gears to dust.
Which brings us to the devastating legacy mentioned in the final lines of the text. Their legacy is one of pure, unadulterated paranoia, a grim testament that in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the only truth is that there is no truth.
It's the total collapse of objective reality. If every transmission can be spoofed, if every supply manifest can be altered, if every supposed ally might be a surgically altered sleeper agent.
Then history itself becomes a battlefield where nothing can be verified. You live in a constant state of epistemological freefall.
This has been an incredibly heavy but utterly fascinating journey through the Hydra's shadow.
It really has.
We started by looking at the biological anomaly of the twin Primarchs, Alpharius and Omegon, and we explored how that multi-headed leadership structure created a military force immune to traditional defeat or psychological profiling.
Then we moved into the paradox of the Horus Heresy, analyzing how a web of schemes so complex that it obscures true loyalty ends up serving the chaotic entropy of the warp simply by dismantling the concept of truth itself.
We looked at the logistics of their decentralized, cell-based structure. We saw how a deep, culturally ingrained distrust of absolutes allows them to function like an autonomous internet virus, adapting and executing complex systemic failures without ever needing to communicate with a central command.
And we broke down the granular mechanics of the unseen war. We walked through how altering a single spreadsheet and planting a rumor can cause a heavily fortified imperial world to execute its own defenders, proving that psychological manipulation is vastly more efficient than orbital bombardment.
Even stepping outside the lore of the 41st millennium for a second, this feels like an incredibly relevant thought experiment. We live in an era of information overload. We deal with deepfakes, algorithmic echo chambers, and conflicting narratives constantly.
It is a profound lesson in the vulnerabilities of any structured society.
Understanding the mechanics of how information can be weaponized to create self-defeating paranoia is a stark reminder of how fragile societal trust really is, and how easily a system can be turned against itself.
Looking at the entirety of this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought derived from the text's conclusion.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
The source notes that the Alpha Legion's ultimate legacy is pure paranoia, and their goal is to make the enemy defeat itself through internal conflict.
Right. They want the Imperium to pull the trigger on itself.
So think about the current state of the Imperium of Man. It is a society utterly obsessed with hunting for the enemy within.
Yeah, they have vast galaxy-spanning organizations dedicated entirely to rooting out heresy.
Executing dissidents, encouraging neighbors to inform on each other in the name of security. They burn their own worlds to deny them to the enemy.
The Imperium is, by its very nature, hyper-paranoid.
Exactly. So here is the question. What if the Alpha Legion doesn't actually need to do anything anymore?
Wait, what do you mean?
What if they haven't launched a major operation in centuries? If the goal was to infect the system with a self-replicating paranoia, what if the Imperium's own obsessive, violent hunting for traitors is doing all of the Alpha Legion's work for them?
Oh, that is bleak. Has the Hydra already won simply because the Imperium can no longer trust itself?
They might not even need to plant a lie anymore. The Imperial machine is generating its own destruction, fueling its own endless purges. The Alpha Legion can just sit back in the shadows and watch the Empire burn itself down from the inside, fueled by the very mechanisms designed to protect it.
It's like they slipped a virus into the hospital's diagnostic computers. They broke the X-ray machine, they scrambled the blood test results, and now the patient is performing exploratory surgery on themselves in the dark.
Cutting out healthy organs because they are convinced they are tumors.
The surgeons are killing the patient, and the original saboteur isn't even in the building anymore.
A perfect, terrifying analogy.
We're going to leave you to ponder that one. If an empire's defining cultural trait becomes paranoia, does the enemy even need to strike? We'll let you decide if the only truth is truly that there is no truth. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the shadows of the XX Legion. We will catch you next time.